This is just a quick video to show where I'm up to in terms of playing with the Sonoff NSPanel. This is my test rig. It's got a couple of devices on already. It's got a light dimmer that's already flashed to ESPHome. It's got a socket that is also an ESPHome flash and an LED controller that is flashed to WLED. All of those devices are already on Home Assistant. All have some form of local control. The socket tester is just to make an easy view of when the socket is on or off. And this is the NSPanel. This one is now flashed to ESPHome. I'm using the NSPanel component by the ESPHome team, but I've made some amendments and I've also worked out how to drive some of the additional functionality outside of the NSPanel component, which gives me the flexibility to manipulate the widgets and the thermostat to sync with Home Assistant. This particular one is also, so the NSPanel component is updating the time, the Wi-Fi state, it's updating the temperature using the onboard temperature sensor, and it's controlling the relays through the buttons and updating the screen. That's all through the existing NSPanel. I'm actually driving the weather icon with the ESP32 directly accessing the internet to pull down weather information and update accordingly. Currently it's 7 degrees C outside with a range of 7 to 8, and the 27 degrees C is the temperature here with the inside with the lights and the heating on. I currently have all of these devices already on Home Assistant. And you can see that the three devices controlled here are available. I've got a thermostat, the two relays from the NSPanel, and some of the other features that the NSPanel component exposes. You can see that in the top right, the relays are updating according to the state on the NSPanel, and indeed, obviously that control is full two-way with syncing between them. You can see if I operate the switch, it's this Christmas tree lights. This plug was recently controlling updates according to the local control, as does the LED lights and the large dimmable bulb all update internally. So on the NSPanel, I've set up 3 widgets currently to represent those 3 devices. The first is the dimmable bulb, this dimmable bulb here. Clicking on that and you have the on-off control. As you can see, that updates Home Assistant and the light, obviously. This particular bulb is not very dimmable, but as I move the slider, the dim state in Home Assistant changes, and obviously the brightness of the bulb, and that is completely two-way syncing both ways. As you can see that the dimmer slider on the NSPanel is updating as the Home Assistant one does. The LEDs also, obviously the brightness works, and if I go to the widget, this is an RGB widget. The colors aren't coming out particularly clearly, but it's red on this side, blue down at the bottom, and green at the top. Currently, obviously, they're green, as you can see in terms of Home Assistant. And if I adjust the color from within Home Assistant, you can see that the LEDs have turned red, and actually the widget has updated to red. Obviously, the brightness fully updates. And if I select a color on the color wheel, I go for blue in this bottom corner, then both Home Assistant and the WLED driven LEDs change as well. Obviously the on-off is there as well. And then the last widget is as a simple on-off for the plug. And because that's only a single outlet widget, it operates directly from the widget screen. You can see on, off, as required. So that's the three widgets I've got programmed so far: the dimmable light, the RGB light, and a single plug. The way the screen actually works is it's when you use the touchscreen, it sends a JSON command to the ESP32. I'm actually passing that through the NSPanel component. It gets logged where I pick it up in an ESP on log event. I can then parse the JSON, work out what's happened, fire off the relevant Home Assistant services. That updates the status on Home Assistant, and then I have another, depending on the particular device, another set of sensors for each device that reads the Home Assistant status, and then on change sends the relevant JSON commands back down to the ESP from the ESP32 in the NSPanel back to the screen to update the status on the screen. If you don't mirror the commands back to the panel, then the panel just resets the previous state after you've touched it after just a few seconds. So for the plug, you simply have to you have a Home Assistant binary sensor that's monitoring the state. For the dimmable bulb, you have to monitor the state as well as the brightness. The brightness is a sensor rather than a binary sensor. And for the WLED, we also have to monitor the RGB color values as well. So there's a fair amount to create the two-way syncing. So whichever end you control it from will fully update the far end. And then I've also done the same for the thermostat. So it syncs the set temperature and the thermostat state with Home Assistant. So it's this thermostat. You can see they're both currently set to 24. This particular thermostat is measuring a temperature in an external shed, which is currently 7.5 degrees outside. But the set point is what the thermostat on the NSPanel is controlling. And again, if I adjust that from within Home Assistant, it updates onto the panel at 19. And if I update it from the panel, you can see it increasing in Home Assistant at the same rate. Obviously, it doesn't matter whether you use the buttons or the slider, that all works. And similarly, if I turn off the thermostat on the panel, then the thermostat on Home Assistant has gone to state off. And if I request heat from the Home Assistant panel, then that also updates on the NSPanel. As I said, the weather here is actually an HTTPS request to the WTTR.in weather service. It's the same service as documented in the Tasmota version of the NSPanel firmware. The work done by Blackadder documenting the protocol is what's made all of this effectively possible by redoing that documentation, but or implementing that from within ESPHome, including the request to get the JSON formatted weather and interpreting that to send down to the panel. And obviously from ESPHome that can happen as frequently or infrequently as required. Currently I've got this set to update once an hour or so. Anyway, so that's where I am in terms of my NSPanel development, utilizing the ESPHome NSPanel component. Hopefully as that NSPanel component evolves, then perhaps some of the quite significant Lambda coding within the ESP components that's required to make some of this two-way working won't be required, and I'll certainly be tracking that development to see how I can leverage the existing component more. It's probably worth saying that in the component I've not declared any of the widgets within the component configuration. I'm doing all of that externally, updating the panel both when it fires on and indeed if you turn the screen power off from Home Assistant, then you have to reinitialize all of the GUI elements when that reboots to make sure that everything comes back to the same state. So if I turn the plug on after a few moments, that will fully update, and you'll see the weather update and the temperature update. There, the weather's come in, and the temperature usually comes in within a minute or so, I've actually got the rate of that temperature update quite low at the moment, because it tends to fill the logs when you're developing and debugging. That'll pop up in a moment. But as you can see, the state of the widgets has updated to reflect that, but the plug in this case is on. The LEDs are on, but the dimmable bulb isn't. And obviously, control is there from the get-go. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if there's any questions, post them down below, or I put the video in a couple of the forum places where people are discussing the NSPanel and ESPHome, and I'll see if I can answer those questions. Thanks everyone. Bye.